Welcome to the Carl King Podcast. To support this podcast, go to patreon.com/Carl King and subscribe for $1 or $5 a month. It's the easiest way to reward me for making things. As promised, I'd like to give a special thank you to my $50 a month patron, Hank Howard III. Unbelievable, $50 a month. And it just so happens that all $50 patrons get their name mentioned here. So thank you, Hank. In this episode, I'm going to give you some updates on my latest creative projects, answer some listener questions, talk about some of the movies I've been watching, or are they called films? I'm going to give the listeners a creative assignment, and I'm also going to end by asking a question. So let's begin to get started. This is Carl King, and I am recording this on Friday, July 8th, 2022. I'm here in Southern California. It is sunny. I'm looking out the window, sitting in my office/studio place, and I've got some trees outside. I can see the trees moving in the wind. I see a dumpster. It is somewhere in it is now in the low 90s. It's 93 degrees Fahrenheit outside. I'm going to talk about a few things today. First of all, let's give an update on Carl King's health. Why don't we do that? Let's talk about my health. I recently got COVID, and you can possibly hear in my voice that I'm still a little bit congested. So I'm still fighting that off just slightly. I caught it about 10 days ago, got my first symptoms, and interesting thing happened. The first day that I woke up with the symptoms, actually woke up about 4 a.m. feeling a bit of a scratchy throat. And later that day, I went out into the kitchen and was making some breakfast and made myself some food on the counter there and got it all pretty much ready to eat and started feeling what I would describe as violently nauseated. Like I was hit with this wave of nausea that was so intense. I walked over to the dining room and sat down in the chair and I put my head on the wooden table and just hoped that this nausea would pass, hoping that it would go away. And I felt chills all over. I didn't really feel any, as far as I know, I didn't have a lot of like COVID symptoms at that moment, but I was sitting there with my head on the table thinking, man, I really hope this passes because I feel like I'm gonna be going out both ends here in a moment. And I was getting the chills and I had my eyes closed. And the next thing I remember, I was on the floor. I was on the tile floor of my dining room with the very heavy, we have these very heavy metal dining chairs. And I don't mean heavy metal as in Rob Halford, but I mean, they look like something out of Game of Thrones. They're made out of metal and wood, and they are very heavy in weight. The chair that I had been sitting on was completely knocked over, which is pretty impressive because it's such a large chair. It was on its side in my face, and I was on the floor staring at that chair. And I felt a little bit of like, I don't know, like a cold sensation in my abdomen, and I wasn't sure what that was, but I kind of opened my eyes and I was very confused. How did I end up on the floor here? I don't remember getting on the floor. So apparently I had fainted. My wife had been in her office one room over, and she'll usually hear a sound and come out and, what's going on out here? Oh my God, thinking that maybe the cats had broken something, but this time she did not come out when she heard the sound. And it must have been quite a loud sound for a 200-pound person and a very large heavy metal chair crashing on the tile. I don't know how, but I was not hurt. The sort of armrest of the chair, which is a big metal thing, kind of dug into my abdomen, and just, it just kind of hurt, and that was it. It didn't break the skin or anything like that, and that hurt for a few days. But I was there on the tile floor, and she came out of her office as if nothing was going on. She was just on her way, I don't know, to the kitchen or something like that. And I said something to her, and she saw me on the floor and ran over. Oh my God, what happened? And she noticed that I had a bit of a scratch on my forehead. And so it seemed as if I had hit my head. And I think I had only hit my head, maybe like scratched it on the corner of the table as I slid off of the table onto the floor. So it was kind of a miracle that there was no serious injury. I don't know how I didn't hurt myself. Impressive stuff. So I was there shaking a bit and covered in cold sweat, and pale, just a bit disoriented. So basically got up and sat on the couch. She helped me over to the couch, and I sat there and kind of recovered over some time. We didn't end up calling an ambulance because it didn't seem like I was physically hurt in any way. And I went on to have, some pretty bad COVID symptoms over the next several days. Spent a lot of time in bed just watching movies, watching TV. And I'll talk about some of those movies that I watched here a little bit later. Before I get into all that stuff, let me give you an update on some of the projects I'm working on. There's a project I just released exclusive to my Patreon patrons, and it is called How to Sell a Effing Audiobook. And it was actually recorded in 2004 as a sort of mini companion project that I was working on for the How to Sell album. And I think it's about 26 minutes long, 24 minutes, something like that. It's a sort of, I don't know if anyone out there has listened to, well, probably not. I seem to be the only person in the world who enjoys listening to sales and motivational tapes like Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, that sort of thing. Jim Rohn is my all-time favorite. So what I was doing at the time was creating an audiobook from the printed book that I released that accompanied the How to Sell the Whole Effing Universe to Everybody Once and For All album. So there was the three or four disc album, 4 hour album. And then there was a printed book that I did, which was all the liner notes and this crazy sort of philosophical guide to accompany all of the sales and philosophical ideas and all the spam rantings and all of that stuff. And then I was doing an abridged audiobook. And I decided, hey, I have this. Why don't I throw this up here on Patreon? So you can hear that. You can download the high quality. I did a slight remix of it, a little bit of audio cleanup, and threw some sound effects and stuff in. So you can hear me reading portions of that ridiculous book on Patreon. And I think all membership levels have access to that download. And I thought the title was kind of funny, of How to Sell a Effing Audiobook, because it means a couple of different things that can be taken two different ways, right? It's how to sell, but then there was sort of an implied colon, a audiobook. It should be an audiobook. How to sell, colon, an audiobook. No. That's not even the name. How to sell, colon, a effing audiobook. An effing? Anyway, go listen to it. Doesn't matter. I know you're not going to listen to it. Next item I'm working on for Patreon is actually a book. And it is what I am calling deep liner notes for my first Sir Millard Mulch CD from 1998. I don't know if anyone out there has heard this. You can also find it inside Patreon. I think $5 patrons and up have access to download it in very high quality as WAV files. I actually sort of upsampled from the CD and slightly remastered and EQ'd it up to 24-bit 48K. So if you want to hear a nice remastering, re-EQ for easier listening, go and grab that if you're a $5 and above patron. Anyway, back to the book that I was talking about. It's actually going to be somewhere around 75 to 80 pages, and I'm calling it Deep Liner Notes for 50 intellectually stimulating themes from a cheap amusement park for robots and aliens, Volume 1, which I released in 1998, the first Sir Millard Mulch CD, and it details the years of my life from 1996 until 1999. So it's also a bit of a memoir. I think that's how you pronounce it. It always makes me think of that scene in Burn After Reading where John Malkovich says that he's, going to do some writing or thinking about writing a memoir. And he's like leaning back in this comfortable chair with this, in a bathrobe and sitting at home with a little handheld micro cassette recorder. Great scene. Very pretentious. Makes me feel very silly to call it my very important memoir. Anyway, it details all the time of what led up to the recording of that CD. And it's going to be full of photos, scans of the original notation when I was writing some of the songs, like Broccoli. It's got crazy, weird flyers. It has my own personal notes that I was writing at the time. It's going to have a lot of neat stuff. And the whole thing, coincidentally, I don't know how that's coincidental, but it was edited. All of the text was edited by my friend Chris Higgins, who I'm working on the new Tetris series, Best of Five, the documentary series. So Chris Higgins helped me edit all of that text and really did an amazing job on helping me make a clear, well-written story about that album. So thank you, Chris Higgins. I'm hoping to be able to release that thing. Oh boy, what month? This is the new month already. This is July. So I'm hoping to get it up there in July. And I have started actually laying out the whole thing in InDesign. And it's going to be like a press-ready PDF. So it's possible I could print up some copies of that book. So we'll see what happens. We will see when we get to that phase. Let's do a quick update on what I have been watching as far as movies. Is anyone here a member of Letterboxd? Does anybody know this website or app called Letterboxd? Interesting website where you can keep track of all the films you watch and all the films you want to watch. And you can see what your friends are watching, all that sort of neat stuff. First of all, I'm about halfway through watching The Holy Mountain by Alejandro Jodorowsky. You familiar with this? Some of you might be familiar with a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune, which I watched several years ago. It was pretty unbelievable, where this guy it shows all of his crazy concepts for when he was going to make the movie Dune. And I have to say, so far, The Holy Mountain has got to be the most bizarre movie I've ever seen at this point in my life. It's like looking at a series of surreal paintings that are moving. There are these unbelievably large soundstage sets, and the composition and ideas are just so striking and disturbing. There's just weird nudity going on. There are animals walking around. It seems like that's a big thing. Like he will position an animal in the scene for some reason, like a hippo or a pelican wandering around in the background. And it is just bold and it hits the eye and the brain. So if you have not seen that movie, I mean, I started out watching David Lynch years ago thinking David Lynch was strange. And of course he is. But this is just way beyond. It makes no sense, yet the cinematography, I mean, it makes no sense to me. I'm sure there's someone out there who's like, wow, this is the most meaningful movie ever made with all this symbolism. It's got all this magic and occult stuff. It's like you're in a dream. But the visual style, I think, is what is so striking about it. Actually, I'd say about halfway through the movie, there's some dialogue that starts in, and it gives it a different feel and it feels more cheap, I think, because it seemed like the first half of the movie was without any dialogue. And I think I remember the first line of dialogue that actually pops up in the movie was like, oh, this is strange now that there's people talking, which of course doesn't make it any less strange. It's like just a different type of strange. Also, there are some people who are really anti-Jodorowsky because of some controversial things he did in the press early on, and I didn't get deep into reading about it, so I don't know much about the guy, but this movie, I would say, is the strangest movie I've ever seen, and I would make someone like Chubode watch this probably, at least like 10 minutes of it, you just have to be exposed to what is possible in filmmaking. The options that you have if you want to make films. This is one of those things that's like, oh, that. I have to say, I kind of started down this path of watching older films, these artsy filmmaker films, because I listened to a lot of Mark Borchardt's radio show. And if you haven't heard it, it's called Cinema Tonight. It plays on River West Radio out of Milwaukee. That's, I think, in Wisconsin. And the episodes are individually uploaded to SoundCloud, so that's where I listen to them. And I listen to Mark Borchardt's show, not only because I enjoy his personal philosophical rants, but I also, I get exposed to so many films and filmmakers and books that I would never otherwise understand because I never went to film school, and this whole area of film, what he would refer to as film, is just a new subject for me. And it's kind of funny to look back. Recently, my wife was watching some Marvel movies. I think right now she's watching all of the Marvel movies in sequence that they supposedly happen in the Marvel timeline. And so I was watching some of these, and I thought, man, this is some vanilla stuff that I didn't realize how vanilla my tastes were like a decade ago. And that's not to say that, oh, I'm so superior now, my tastes are so refined, but it definitely has influenced my tastes and opened my mind to other possibilities of filmmaking style to listen to Mark Borchardt so much. So check out Holy Mountain, The Holy Mountain, and also check out Mark Borchardt's show, Cinema Tonight. All right, along those lines, I also watched this film called Titane, and I don't know if anybody has heard of this. This is another surrealist, disturbing film, which actually has more of a plot than it would seem The Holy Mountain had. But this woman who has sort of an affinity for vehicles. I don't know how to describe that any other way. I don't want to ruin the plot, but let's see. It was from 2021, Titane, directed by Julia Ducournau. And I don't know if this was, what was this, like a French or Italian film? It reminded me a bit of something like Eraserhead. And I have not seen Eraserhead in thousands of years. But some of the scenes in Titane are just gruesome. So unless you're into some very disturbing, strange, mind-bending gore, maybe don't watch that one. Another film I watched recently, which is actually a documentary, it's called Val, which is about Val Kilmer. It's directed by Leo Scott and someone named Ting Poo. I guess Val Kilmer was a very serious actor, had a serious commitment to being an actor, you know, like a theater actor and like a acting school actor. It shows through all of this footage that he captured himself. He was like an obsessive home video camera type guy who carried it around everywhere with him, filming his kids and his wife and his family. And I never knew what to think of Val Kilmer. I don't know much about him. I guess he was Batman at some point and he was in Top Gun, but what the heck do I know, you know? So that was a pretty interesting documentary to see how much how much love that guy had for filmmaking. And also to see what a great sense of humor he has about his, physical problems these days. Because I think he had like a tracheotomy, so he has to stick his finger over a tube on his throat to be able to talk. I definitely recommend that documentary. It reminded me a lot of Will Mayer, my old friend Will Mayer, who seemed to always have a video camera with him and was always obsessively documenting. And that's not to say that I don't obsessively document my own life in certain ways. I mean, this whole process that I've been doing for writing this 50 intellectually stimulating book, I have a filing cabinet in the garage, and it is just full of every flyer and every graphic design thing and business card and crazy idea I've ever made. And, as I'm getting older, I'm starting to wonder, is this stuff ever going to get released? Is this ever going to be assembled into anything? Could it be a coffee table book? Will it be out there for people to see? Not that anybody needs to see it, but I've always thought of keeping all this stuff as important. And part of the process of doing this 50 intellectually stimulating book is, wow, I've taken, a good 4-year chunk of my life from 96, 97, 98, 99. That's 4 years, and telling a pretty good story about those 4 years, putting it into context, re-examining that time, learning about some of the difficult thinking patterns that I had at that time, the troublesome thinking patterns. Maybe some of those thinking patterns I still have. Maybe they slow me down in my life. Maybe I'm still holding on to them. What can I learn about re-examining that time period? So it feels good to take those 4 years and make something out of them. Finally dig into those filing cabinets and make sense of all of those things that me and my friends were making. And it wasn't just about the music. I mean, it was very much a struggle against Venice, Florida, growing up in a retirement town. A lot of frustration, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of failure, dealing with that, dealing with obscurity, not being able to do what I really wanted to do, and not really being sure who to blame for that. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. Will Mayer was actually, there are some things that he sent me that I was able to incorporate into this book. So it's pretty cool stuff. And it's been a great learning experience for me. And again, I hope to get that out there sometime this month. It's looking pretty good so far. So I was talking about the documentary Val, and it just reminded me of that feeling of, I guess it was revealed to me how serious of an artist, or committed of an artist, Val Kilmer was. All the way up until modern times, he's still documenting, still carrying around, it still shows him running around with his iPhone filming stuff. And he's always trying to capture the moment and capture meaning and find meaning in moments. And I can kind of relate to that. Last night, my drummer friend Mike Stone, or Michael C. Stone, or whatever you want to call him, whatever he wants to call himself is okay. But he was on Twitch last night, and I was at my studio working on some video stuff that didn't require, part of my video work when I'm editing a bunch of stuff for someone. Part of it is purely technical, and I can do it without watching the video, like I'm converting files or syncing things up. So I was watching Michael C. Stone's Twitch stream last night, where he drums and plays along to various songs, takes requests. And someone requested, I think it was a band called FM, or an artist, or maybe a guitarist who goes by the name FM. And so I got the idea in my head of like, I wonder what FM stands for. So I began in the chat, I started typing words, started typing these 2-word phrases, sort of like band names or song names or album titles, that would be for the abbreviations FM. And I had a lot of fun with that. I can't remember very many of them. One of them was probably my favorite, which is kind of disgusting, was Fishy Merkin. Or you could have Floppy Manhood. Or you could have something like Fiscal Management. Anyway, the point is, I tried to come up with as many variations on that as I could as he's playing along to, like, I don't know, a bunch of pop songs from the 80s. So I'm over there just typing and typing for hours, these variations of FM. And it got me to thinking, maybe we could play that word game on my podcast. Maybe I can make a weekly suggestion and the listeners can submit their ideas, their entries into this game. So here's my first challenge. These are the 2 letters that I'm going to assign to you, the listener. Let's do SR. S as in Sam, R as in Renegade. I cannot tell you how much fun I had and how much it lit up my brain to play that game. It was almost like playing Scrabble. Sex, religion. Hey, that's a Steve Vai album. So take those 2 letters and come up with as many variations as you can. Something to consider when you're doing this, you can add the word ing, or you can make the second word plural. Try to actually make the 2 terms mean something very unusual. Something to consider is that some words are just naturally funnier than others, like frog, fingernail. I mean, those start with F, like last night's challenge. And if you come up with some good ones, email them to me, and I will see if I can list them on the next episode of this podcast. Carl@carlkingdom.com. That's CarlKingdom.com. Let's take our first listener question. Question number 1. How do you come up with cartoon characters? Okay, first of all, the thing that I've learned so far in creating a character is that it's very difficult to create a single character. I like to think in groups of 2 characters, 3 characters, 5 characters. For instance, if I'm making up the Dragon Tooth Inn, which is my latest cartoon project, I can't just make up the main protagonist and have him floating there in a vacuum. He needs to be reacting against other characters. So there needs to be a character. Let's say you have a character and you want him to be an angry person. If you want that to be your main character, you can't just have an angry person. You need a character that is sort of the opposite of an angry person to be their partner, to play off of them. So you'd have the angry person, and then what is something that would be a good contrast to an angry person and make them even more angry is a person who can't get angry. So you have one person, very irritable all the time, and then another one who the angry person is jealous of because he's not angry ever, never loses his cool. Maybe he's an optimist. So then you have some drama and tension between the 2 characters. It's pretty difficult to write an entire pilot with just 2 characters. And I say pilot because, if you don't know this, a pilot is the first episode of a TV show. And I happen to gravitate towards creating animated pilots. I don't really write features for some reason. I don't have much interest in that. I like the potential of setting up these 2, 3, 5 characters in a location and creating all this possibility for them to interact. So I like to have a variety of characters that can fight. And I don't mean physically fight, because I really have no interest in action movies. Speaking of action movies, I'll go on a little bit of a side quest here. I watched that new Marvel movie, what was it called? Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, something like that. Man, I just could not get into that. That movie made no sense to me. And not because it blew my mind with all the multiverse stuff. It really didn't. It was just like, I'm not buying it. I am not buying into these characters. And there was all this physical stuff and action and yeah, I don't know. Anyway, not to dwell on that. Let's get back into creating cartoon characters. I like to try to find some sort of psychological problem that I have or someone I know has and embed them in those characters as their sort of core issue. When I feel like I'm writing well, it's because I have embedded those psychological issues where I am writing from sort of a pathological place where I'm revealing my inner thoughts that I'm not even aware that I have. And they're sort of absurd views on interactions or people or situations. And to me, that's what makes the characters feel alive. So what I try to avoid are just these sort of physical, tangible action goals of like, this is a dude and there's another dude trying to do a thing and we need to stop the bad guy dude from doing the bad guy thing, or we need to take this object and we need to take it from here and we need to take it to the other planet. Like that to me is so uninteresting. I'm more interested in a, what would I call it? Like a Coen Brothers type, Adult Swim, classic Adult Swim, more like a Seinfeld, Curb Your Enthusiasm type character-based story. I mean, I would even call myself like a plot skeptic. I have a very hard time believing that plot is the most important thing in a story or TV show or film. And I haven't worked through my own problems with that yet and reached a lot of clarity, but there's something about plot that completely distracts from the thing that I care about, which is character. And it seems to me that plot is something that should be there in some way, but if you're focusing on it as the most important thing that needs to be done, like a task that needs to be done, like we need to close the castle gates, like that's the plot of the movie, or I don't know, like The Big Lebowski. The dude starts out with wanting to get his rug situation solved. I don't think he wants his rug back. He's not going to get his rug back because his rug was urinated on. And so that kind of like starts the whole thing in motion. But there's not a lot of solid plot going on. They're pushed forward in this sort of plot to try to save this girl that was possibly kidnapped or possibly kidnapped herself. Of course, this movie is like a genre parody, and also there's a lot of references to a film called The Big Sleep or a book called The Big Sleep. I think it was Raymond Chandler. I've never read it. But my point is, why am I getting into talking about The Big Lebowski? Anyway, my point is that I find plot very distracting if it's made the main thing that you keep coming back to in a film. And that's what you've got in a lot of Avengers movies. It's always a good guy or a bunch of good guys versus a bad guy or a bunch of bad guys. And it's like watching a football game or watching a video game. And honestly, I'm much more interested in people standing around talking in a room, talking about their problems, talking about their fears and pathological weird malfunctions, being wrong about things, being confidently wrong about things. And so that's where my mind tends to go when I am creating a cartoon character. And we've got another question here. This is question number 2. What do you dislike? Wow, okay. Well, I can tell you that something on a daily basis that I dislike is cars. I do not like cars at all. I never have. I never wanted to own a car, but I do. I think the first time I bought a car, I was like 32 or 33 years old. I have a bad history, going all the way back with family tragedies involving cars. I've been in several car accidents that have caused me PTSD. And generally, it's just a bummer for me every day. It makes my day worse to hear cars, to see them. I hate being in neighborhoods where I see cars lined up on both sides of the street. I don't like hearing traffic. I don't like hearing people revving cars. There's a guy here outside my studio who starts up his GT whatever at the end of every day at like 7 p.m. And it's just unbelievable how loud that thing is. And I hate it. There's something, I would love to be able to get over it. I would love to be able to get beyond being affected by these things. But I've just never liked cars. And some people love them. Like, I try to remember every time that guy revs that loud as hell engine, he's getting a rush of excitement. He feels great. This is the best day in the world, man. When I can hit that gas pedal. And meanwhile, I'm like being traumatized over here. I'm getting like a negative adrenaline rush. And I think someone like me is not aware of what he's experiencing, and he's not aware of what I'm experiencing. And so many of these sort of experiences in life, so many things about society, civilization are, that's a stimulus or a stimulation, something like that, that is linked to positive or negative chemicals in our brain. And it just happens to be wired that way from our upbringing and experience. And two different people can have these extremely different wirings. So it's also interesting to consider, man, why should I be proud of the fact that I hate cars? Because it's just random. It's like a roll of the dice in life that I grew up and got to where I am hating cars and the sound of cars. My point is, I try to not take it too seriously and let my ego get too worked up. It's just in the moment. It's so frustrating. I don't know if you've ever seen, I think it may have been Steven Spielberg's first film ever. His first, maybe not his first film. His first commercial film. I don't even know if you could call this a commercial film, but it was actually shot near here where I live, and it was called Duel. I think it's Duel, like a sword duel. And it's about this guy who's, I don't know, I think he's just driving from point A to point B. He's on his way to like a business meeting or something like that, or an event, something he had to kind of dress up for and try to get to. And he's driving down the road, and this big, disgusting, angry truck pulls up behind him. That's just blasting out smoke, exhaust, and it's honking at him, and it's this ferocious machine from hell. And it won't get off his ass. And it's like following him everywhere. And he's just, and then the rest of the movie is like him trying to get away from this angry truck, which is exactly how I feel every day when I drive across town. If I'm just like driving to get groceries or driving over here to the studio, I'm like, man, I've got to get in the right lane and just hope that there's not some dumbass in a big white loud truck right on my ass. If the speed limit is 50, I probably go 45 and stay in the right lane. And I just want everybody else to go away. Just go around. Leave me alone. And so I'll be driving along at like a safe speed. And to my left is just car after car being pissed off, driving around me and driving past me. And it's exactly the same on the interstate. It's like if the speed limit is 70 or something, I'll probably go 65 or 70 even. And it's like, man, one car after another. It's like hundreds of cars getting pissed off and driving around me and driving past me. Yet I'm in the right lane. It's like, well, go around if there's a problem. Anyway, you asked, what do I dislike? What do I hate? It's cars. It's traffic. I think cars, I can't wait until someday there are no more cars. But honestly, I don't know what all these people who take so much pride in their cars, like they think they are a car or what? Like there's this weird transference of ego where you get into a car and suddenly you think you're your car. People identify with their car like, what style of car represents what I am? Well, no, nothing represents. You're just a idiot inside a machine that some company sold you. And cities and towns are laid out in this inefficient way that you need a car to drive around. It's got to be one of the worst ideas in the world to have an individual engine in every little vehicle. Like, why does there's this thing called trains. Come on. Buses. Not that I want to be on a bus riding with a bunch of people. Anyway, this segment is getting way too long, and we don't need to talk about cars anymore. Okay, let's move on to question number 3. Do you plan to make some new music again? I'm going to assume this question is referring to music like making a Sir Millard Mulch album, or a Dr. Zoltan album, or a Carl King album, original music album. I don't really know. I mean, it seems like people out there would be interested in a new Sir Millard Mulch album. I don't really know what I will do with that in the future. I do have some ideas. I have a few album ideas that I've set aside. I have this, document on my computer that is a huge list of musical ideas and album ideas and song titles and things like that. And I just store them in there, and maybe someday one of them will seem important enough to do. But I'd say the answer to that is yes, I just don't know when. The thing that's stopping me from doing that is I just have so many more projects ahead of that in the pipeline. I mean, right now I'm trying to finish up The Dragon Tooth Inn, and that keeps getting delayed. I got delayed first because of COVID, and then my other voice actor, Stephanie Sutherland, she got delayed because of COVID. So we're hoping to record, I think in 1 or 2 weeks, I'm going to have her over here and finish up her female characters for Dragon Tooth Inn. Then, of course, I've also got this 50 intellectually stimulating book that I'm trying to wrap up and get out there, get that through the pipeline. Then I've also got the Tetris documentary series with Chris Higgins, which is going to be a very large amount of music. It's going to be like 3 to 4 hours of original score that'll be like this blend of heavy metal, 8-bit computer, video game, and orchestral stuff sort of all mixed together. And we'll just have to see what that sounds like in the end. I've done the temp score for a lot of it as just like piano stuff, but I'm planning to get into the actual final scoring of it in the next couple of weeks. I've just got to get my computer set up and all my sample libraries organized and create a new template and really dig in on that. Part of the other problem is that if I move from if I do music for like 3 or 4 months and get really into it, my chops are there. And then if I don't do it for 6 months, I don't remember how to do music at all. And it's like starting over. It takes me like a couple of weeks to get back to feeling like, oh, I'm back to my old tricks again. Okay, I know how to do this. Same thing with screenwriting or animation or any of these things. It's like jumping between multiple disciplines that it takes a little bit of time to warm up. So I can see doing some music again, like maybe later this year. I don't know. I've been thinking of making like a song-based album and actually going back, and there's always like, okay, I've done this, I've done that, I've done the orchestral stuff, I've done the very complicated Dr. Zoltan stuff. And so there are these areas of like, well, I haven't done such and such, like making a They Might Be Giants type or Ween type song album in a long time. Like I haven't written songs, like singy songs with funny lyrics. I don't remember the last time I did that. That was like, I guess the last singy song that I wrote was probably the very last track on the Dr. Zoltan album. And that must have been in like 2008 or 2009. So how long has that been? This is 22. So that's like 10, 11, 12, 13 years since I've actually written a funny, weird rock song with funny lyrics. And I think I would like to get back to that. I'd really like to be able to do that better. So that is one of the things on my list eventually, and hopefully I don't die before I get to do that. And now let's move on to a segment that I'm going to call a question. I want to leave you all with a question. And this is a question that's come up a lot over the years, something I think about a lot. And that is, what is the difference between art and entertainment? Is there really a difference between those two things? I think Frank Zappa at some point said there is no difference between art and entertainment. And I thought that was a strong stance to take. I can see them as different in my mind, for sure, but let's find out what you think about it. Send me an email, carl@carlkingdom.com, if you have an answer to the question, what is the difference between art and entertainment? Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/carlking and join. You can use PayPal and you can join for $1 a month to support this kind of thing. $5 a month. And once again, a reminder, a shout out to Hank Howard III, my biggest Patreon patron. $50 a month. Thank you very much, Hank. And if you would like to submit a question for me to answer on this podcast, or something else you just want me to talk about, you can get a hold of me at carl@carlkingdom.com. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you next week.